Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jessica Flynn and I am the owner and maker of Flynn Sisters Boutique, and today we're going to be doing a kind of summer version of the Gypsy Leopard design, and I'm also going to show you how to put spots on it without having to hand paint them. I thought this was a really fun look. I was super inspired by Bear Trends and her version of the Gypsy Leopard design, and so I just wanted to share that with you guys in this tutorial. Yes, I know we do a lot of leopard print tutorials on this channel, but I think leopard print is a neutral, so whatever. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this tutorial, and I really think that this is more of like an inspiration kind of muse type video rather than a tutorial, just because we've already taught the technique before. So I'll show you what colors I use for this design and kind of how I planned out and applied the decals. So I hope this is helpful. Also, some of y'all haven't even seen my Gypsy Leopard tutorial, so if you haven't seen that, this will be new for you. So anyway, that's enough chit chat for me. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we're gonna start with a fully prepped and sanded cup like I normally would, and I base painted it white with a white matte primer paint. And I also used a few of these colors, well, I used all of these colors to paint kind of this swirl pattern. And to do this, you're just gonna spray small, quick dashes of color across the cup in a swirl motion until you get a look that you like. And then I let my cup dry in front of a small space heater before I apply the epoxy for the epoxy method, just so it's warm and it's easier to apply the epoxy. It also helps that paint dry faster. Here I'm applying less than 5 milliliters of epoxy to the cup. What you'll want to do for this is just mix up just 5 milliliters of epoxy, and you probably won't even use all of it. In fact, you probably will use like 1 or 2 milliliters. Anyway, you want to spread this all over the cup and get it super smooth and let it sit for a couple of minutes just so those lines totally smooth out. Here's the glitter colors that we used. I will have them listed below in the description box along with a link and a description, or excuse me, a discount code, so you could pick some of these up. So I'm going to start with my chunkiest colors first, and the white section is my focal point of the swirl, so I'm definitely going to start with the white. Here I'm just using Snow Confetti. This is my chunkiest white color that I'm using, and I just lightly sprinkled that in. Next, I'm going to sprinkle in Lassie, which is my chunkiest pink color. And when I'm sprinkling this in for the first layer of glitter, I'm just really lightly sprinkling, and I'm going with the sprayed on colors as my guide. So it's kind of just like paint by numbers, only easier. So you're just gonna lightly sprinkle on all your chunky colors. This is Head Over Teals. And I'm just using this as kind of some accent areas in my swirl. And don't worry if it's super sparse coverage, that is what you want. Think of this layer of glitter as like a rough draft. Next, I'm going in with Kaneohe. I don't know how to pronounce that. All the colors I'm using today are Peachy Olive Glitters, of course. Again, this color is a little bit chunkier, so I am going to lay this down first as part of my rough draft layer of colors. Next, we're going to go in with Wednesdays. Wednesdays is a hot pink, and again, we're still just going in really, really lightly. All right, so once I've got all the chunky glitters laid down in my rough draft layer of glitter, I'm gonna go in with my finer cuts. This is Bliss that I'm using here, and I'm just kind of still lightly sprinkling. You don't want to like really pile it on there yet. We're still kind of trying to establish a blend between all the colors. Next, I'm going to go in with 10, 12, 13. This is the mint color that's going to help kind of blend between that white and the pink. And I'm also going to sprinkle a little more Kaneohe in through here as well. Once I've established a pretty good fade, I just start layering on colors with all the finest cuts of each of the colors that I'm using. For this kind of peachy, melony orange color, I'm using Crush, and this is a super fine glitter. And so using the super fine cuts last, again, is just going to really help you blend between colors. And you're just going to keep building up color until you get the coverage that you want and the blend that you want also. So the advantage to doing just small light sprinkles at a time is that it really gives you the opportunity to blend the colors between the swirls really well. And because we used epoxy method, you can take your time putting your glitter on. You don't have to pile it on super fast in the fear that, you know, your glue is going to dry. In this final step, I'm really just letting it rip, especially with this Bliss white. This is where you want to really pack on the color and make sure that you didn't miss any spots. We're going to let that dry for 2 to 3 hours, and then I'm going to lightly brush it off and tap off the excess. And then I am going to spray seal this with Rust-Oleum 2 times clear gloss spray. I'm going to give that spray sealer about 20 minutes to dry, and then I'm going to apply my first layer of epoxy. That first layer is going to dry for about 4 to 6 hours, and then I'm going to come right in my second coat, and I'm going to let that second coat of epoxy dry for 8 to 12 hours before we move on to the next step. All right, so we are going to do the leopard spots on here. Now, I've already measured, and what you're gonna wanna do is measure all the way around the cup and the area that you're going to have your spots. So I already measured this. I know this is about a 13-inch area, so I wanna make sure I have at least enough to cover that area. So on my computer, I'm gonna pull up my favorite leopard print file from Bertrand's Digi Designs. I will have the link below. Obviously, we've used this one before on the channel. It's one of my favorites. So we're gonna have to resize this. I want all of my spots to be 1 inch or smaller. I don't want them to exceed 1 inches. So I just will resize this until I can kind of see through the grid that none of my spots really do exceed 1 inch, okay? So if you're working with the same file, you would resize this pattern to about 7 by 7 inches. So also, I'm not gonna be using all of these spots. So to avoid wasting a bunch of vinyl and taking a bunch of time cutting spots I won't use, I'm going to slice part of the pattern. So I just pull up shapes, get a square on there, and I'm just going to put a square over the section of spots that I want, and then I will select both the square and the pattern and hit slice. When I do that, I'll be left with just the spots I want, and I'll select all the stuff I don't want and delete it. So now there's a bunch of like sliced off spots here at the bottom. Since I'm not going to be using those and I don't want to waste time and energy cutting them, I'm just going to go over to contour really quick, and I'm going to contour those out of my cut so that I only have complete spots being cut. All right, so, oh, I missed a spot there. Come on. There we go. All right, so now this is ready to cut. So I'll just go to make it, and I will load my vinyl and get it cut, and then I will show you how I place these on the cup. All right, so before you move on to this step, you are going to want to make sure that your cup is completely sanded and smooth. I did sand the rim really well and the sides until everything was nice and smooth, and then I washed it off with warm dish soap and water and dried it off with coffee filters before starting on this decal step. And for the most part, I'm just going to hand place these spots on the cup. Now, you can do this two different ways. You can pick it up off the transfer sheet with like a knife or by hand or whatever. I like to start by, I like to start on one end of this swirl, so usually towards the bottom or the top. And I try to place the spots in the same direction that they are laid in the pattern, so it kind of looks like it makes sense, if you will, like kind of all the spots are flowing in one direction. And I also try to space them similarly to how they're spaced in the pattern. So the other way that you could do this is grab a small piece of transfer paper and use your transfer paper to pick up just a couple dots at a time and use that to place them. So here I just have like a small little like 3x2 piece of transfer paper, or like transfer tape, and I'm just gonna pick up a couple of the spots and place them directly onto the cup. I will have a link to the transfer tape that I use also, because a lot of people ask me about that. So I'll just pick up like 3 spots at a time and just kind of place them however they make sense. All right, so we're just going to repeat that process till we get all the way around the cup. Remember, we're just using one of the colors in our spiral as a spot, that we'd be placing the spot. So it's super easy to place them because the swirl already exists. We're just going to be placing them within the boundary lines of that one color swirl. So after we got all the spots placed on there, I am going to be coating this really quickly with Quick Coat. That is a water-based urethane sealer. Yes, you can use polyacrylic instead. I will have a link to both down in the description box. I just prefer Quick Coat because I have it on hand. Anyway, the reason I like to use Quick Coat over any kind of holographic or metallic vinyl is it helps seal the edges in so that I don't get any epoxy lifting up any of the edges of that vinyl. This takes about 45 minutes to dry, and then I will go into my next layer of epoxy, where we will also be mixing in the mica powders and the paint colors for our little swirly line thingies. So I've mixed 30 milliliters of epoxy, and I am only going to be applying about 15 to 20 milliliters onto the cup. And then we'll be using the remainder of that epoxy to add in our colors like our paint and our micas and stuff. After you get this layer of epoxy applied, you're going to want to torch it or use your heat gun, whichever you prefer, because we are not going to put heat on the cup again after this point. So you want to make sure that you take care of all your micro bubbles and all that. And so we're just going to let this roll while we mix our colors. All right, so I've already divided up my remaining epoxy. I had about 15 milliliters left, which is more than enough to do what we're going to do here. And I'm just adding a small amount of paint to my epoxy. This color is called Diva Pink from Apple Barrel. I will have links, of course, listed down below. And this is just a regular acrylic paint. Don't worry if your paint looks a little bit clumpy or stringy and the epoxy is totally fine. Just make sure it's fully mixed. Next color we're going to be using is Caribbean. This is also from Apple Barrel, and again we're just squirting in a very small amount. You could see here. Again, this is a little less than 5, well actually this might be a full 5 milliliters of epoxy in this jar. And we're just going to completely stir that up. And then for the mica color that we're using, I'm using Simply Sarah's Mega, I want to say it's called Mega Vanishing Lilac. I'll also have a link and a discount code in the description box below for this one as well. So just a small little scoop in there, and we're going to fully mix it in. And then I'm going to take this pearlescent powder from Illumilite. It's one of my favorite pearl powders, and I am going to mix a small scoop of that into both the paint colors. This pearlescent powder is going to do two things. It's going to make my colors of paint kind of look pearlescent and sparkly just a little bit. It's really subtle, but it's also going to stabilize the paint in that epoxy to where it's like clumpy or stringy, which actually surprised me. I didn't think that it would really do much in the paint, but I really liked how it transformed the texture of the paint and the epoxy. So I will definitely be doing this a lot more in the future anytime I'm using paint in my epoxy. Next, I'm just going to take that colored epoxy with the stir stick, and I'm just going to string a small line of color along the cup. I'm not touching the cup when I'm doing this. I'm just pulling lines of color straight from the jar onto the cup with my stir stick. It does help if the paint and the epoxy is a little bit stringy. And don't worry if you get like clumps or lumps or anything like that when you're applying this. We can take care of that later. And again, if you need to stop your turner while you're doing this to kind of help you get a little more control, that's okay too. I just like to use the natural flow of the turner to help me apply it. And take your time with this, guys. Like don't try and rush it. I'm doing the same thing with the blue color, and I want to avoid getting any of the paint colors too close to those spots. So definitely be careful when you're doing that. If you find that you're getting like too much movement in your paint, it's most likely due to the fact that you added too much in the epoxy layer prior to this part of the application. You really want to keep that layer of epoxy that we're applying this stuff onto like probably less than 20 milliliters. This is a 30-ounce skinny. So definitely don't want to add too much epoxy before moving into this part of the design. Next, I'm just going to go in with a gloved finger, and I'm going to kind of like remove any of the spots that like got to be kind of like clumpy or too thick. Again, you're just going to use like your finger and kind of wipe it out. Once I've like edited all my paint lines how I want, I'm gonna go in with this mica and epoxy, and I'm just gonna kind of finger paint it in. This is just a very, very subtle look that I'm adding here. Totally optional, of course. But I just think this mega vanishing lilac adds the prettiest, just kind of like subtle pearlescent glow, and it also kind of looks purple and some light. It's really pretty. So I'm just gonna kind of wipe that through in certain areas, just add a little more depth and a little more, just kind of something special to the design. All right, so after I got all the paint colors and the mica on there, I just kind of watched it for a little bit to remove any other spots I didn't like, and then I just let it roll, and that was that. So I did add about 2 more layers of epoxy after this to finish everything up, and after that we were done. So let me know what you guys thought about this one in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you again on Wednesday. If you love this video, you could check out our last video here. Also be sure to find us on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and of course subscribe for all our new videos that come out every Wednesday and Saturday. Thanks so much for watching. See you soon.